Welcome. Abigail Gibbons here, the creator and host of the WOW series. In this week's interview, we're going to be sitting down with Rebecca Boon. She's a partner at Bernstein Litowitz, a firm that I also work at by day. I work in the marketing department, and she, of course, is a partner. And she has been a great mentor to not only me, but plenty of other women and young professionals in the industry. And we're going to be sitting down ahead of our next event, which is taking place on March 10th, Current Feminist Figures in celebration of International Women's Day. And today we're going to learn more about her personal story. So her career journey to partner, some of the challenges she had to face in navigating her career and combining corporate and social change with her career path here at BLB&G, and also her advice for the next generation. So I'm very excited to have her here and get started. So Rebecca, before we get into our conversation, I would love for you to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you so much, Abigail. I'm thrilled to be here and so honored to be on your panel with so many fascinating and talented women. My name is Rebecca. I'm a securities litigation partner at Bernstein Litowitz, and I represent institutional investors prosecuting securities fraud claims, mostly in the form of class action lawsuits. I and everybody else who works at Bernstein are just so committed and to what we do and passionate really about it. So that's my day job and frankly also my night job as
Thank you, Rebecca. And I'd love to chat more. So, the WOW series community, where we are that next generation, we're a lot of millennials and Gen Z, and some of us are who follow us are starting their careers in the legal industry or are just curious about other corporate industries out there. So do you mind sharing a little bit more about what the firm does and what you're doing in the courtroom? I think would be great to hear.
Sure, absolutely. So as I mentioned, we represent institutional investors, and I'm in the class action group, which means that we investigate and pursue fraud claims under the federal securities laws. So what we do is a lot of research and writing and drafting to present a case to the court. And then in the courtroom, we argue and advocate on behalf of our institutional investor clients and ultimately the entire class of investors.
Great. Thank you, Rebecca. I know, so I obviously did not come from the legal industry. So starting at the firm, I had a lot of learning to do and education around what it is that we do. And what I love is that you really are fighting for what's right and advocating for corporate and social change. And you're not only doing that in your career and in your day and night job here at Bernstein, but you also founded the Beyond Me Too working group, which also really connects those two universes. And what I've learned, and I think what we've also learned as a firm, is that the work that you're doing, that we're doing in securities litigation, really does also impact corporate and social change and how we're changing and fighting for people who have been victim of even sexual harassment or discrimination. So I'd love to hear more about how you combined those two working groups. And from there, we can even kind of lead into a challenge that you've had to face in your career, which we'll circle back on.
So I think a main challenge that I faced occurred, frankly, before I even really had a career, and it links up to the Beyond Me Too work that we're doing now. Because in college, I was very passionate about representing survivors of sexual assault and survivors of domestic violence, and I was interning with the Battered Women's Services of Dutchess County, a nonprofit program, and serving there as a courtroom counselor slash advocate. So part of my responsibilities was essentially to accompany survivors of domestic violence in family court proceedings and, just really be there for moral support and to provide advice. And one of the first times that I did that, I was in a courtroom in family court in Dutchess County, New York with a judge, and I had a visible, reaction when he began scolding the woman that I was there advocating on behalf of for not communicating enough with her abusive ex-husband. So I made a face kind of, just in the moment because I was so surprised, frankly, given that I was living in kind of a liberal bubble, I think at the time. And the judge told me to leave the courtroom. And from there, I just really, decided to go to law school because I wanted to be in the courtroom and I wanted to be advocating for survivors. And I continued to pursue that work in the women's rights arena. Ultimately, became a corporate defense lawyer, continued with pro bono opportunities, but had, kind of moved on, at Bernstein Litowitz prosecuting securities class actions, And lo and behold, a couple of years ago, I found, my initial kind of interest and passion in women's rights merging with the securities legal field. And that happened through a couple of really, precedent setting cases that I worked on, where we were able to pursue cases involving instances of sexual harassment and quote unquote Me Too type issues
Mhm.
through the federal securities laws. And that's just been really the culmination of my life's dream, frankly, to be able to pursue these types of social justice issues
Mhm.
while also advocating on behalf of our institutional investors. That in turn led to the formation of the Beyond Me Too working group. I'm a co-founding member of that group, and we have united a group of experts, which include, former prosecutors, a former Southern District of New York judge, diversity and inclusion experts, investigators, and we meet periodically to really think critically about these issues. And the name of our group is Beyond Me Too because we want to focus on, what can we do now going forward. We've seen it, in my line of work with the prosecution of these types of Me Too securities claims, and we're starting to see really significant successes in that realm. But really, overall, our goal is to, put our heads together and figure out how to make corporate America a better place for women to work.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rebecca. And what I love about your story, especially, is I think when we're young in our careers, we, especially for women and any professional who kind of has the same mindset that we have, how can I scale my corporate career? But how can I continue to work in and advocate for these issues that I care about that make the world a better place? And what I love about your story is you prove that it can be done, and your story from very beginning being in the courtroom before you even went to law school played an impact throughout your entire career journey and stayed with you for how can you not make sure this doesn't happen again, or how can you advocate for women's rights. So I love that we're going to be talking more so about how other corporate women and how all professionals can bring this into their career paths and journeys as well. Whether you're like me in marketing or you're like Rebecca and you are a lawyer and in the professional services industry, there's always a way that you can combine these two ideas, that you can have a successful corporate career, but also give back and use what you're doing in your corporate world to advocate for women's rights and gender equality and social change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm thrilled to be part of that movement. I think I'm technically a millennial. Abby, we'll just keep that, between us for purposes of this.
I think you are.
Um, I'm on the fence, but we'll count it for purposes of this discussion. But it's interesting. I think to be a woman and to be successful in corporate America, you have to be so good. You have to be so organized. You have to be able to present yourself in a competent, capable way. You
Mhm.
have to have a strong network of people. And while you're building your corporate career, you can continue, building that building those skills, and then use those skills in order to further your personal interests, and ultimately kind of pursue those passions and don't lose sight of those passions while continuing to be successful in corporate America. And it's interesting, one
Yeah.
of our mentors, my fellow partner, Jeroen Van Quagen, always says, you should always be building a reservoir of goodwill. And
Mhm.
I just think that's such, really brilliant advice, because you never know, who you may come into contact with by virtue of, your day-to-day 9 to 5 or 9 to 9 job, whatever the case may be. And, ultimately you can rely on those contacts and build off of that network. It may turn out that you have things in common with people that you didn't even realize at the time. So, I mean, for me personally, I served on a panel with like-minded individuals. It turned out I'd known some of them from my work on women's issues, just really kind of by happenstance. I was referred to the panel from a former Sherman and Starley colleague who's a professor at the University of Toronto. The panel was hosted here in New York at NYU. So, you have a sort of convergence of all of these different contacts and connections and geographical backgrounds.
Yeah.
From there, from there, the idea to develop the Beyond Me Too working group, really was first formed and kind of grew and expanded from that experience.
Absolutely. I love that advice too, really, the nurturing your network and how early on in your career those connections that you make can be so important. And something that you said too that I think is really integral is, so often we're all thinking about what's next, especially our generation. What's next that I can do? But really valuing and taking those skills that you're learning in your corporate job, especially when you're early in your career, is so integral to advancing you later and advancing that work that you're passionate about. Do you have any other advice that you'd like to share?
Sure. I think that for me personally, something that I really kind of decided when I entered corporate America was that I was going to have, this set of principles. And I
Mhm.
was going to stick to those principles no matter what. So, whatever, the outcome of corporate success would be, I would always have my self respect and my integrity. And I always get a little bit emotional talking about this because it's just something that's so important to me personally. And when I went to interview with Bernstein Litowitz, which with our founding partner, Max Berger, I learned, for the first time that the firm also operated by this single set of core values. And I really think for young women and really just young people, in the workplace, you want to stay true to who you are, really no matter what. And, don't get sucked into feeling like you have to act a certain way. You can figure out how to be yourself and stick to those core principles that make you who you are, while simultaneously building that network and working very hard, to achieve your goals of career success. So I think that's the most important lesson, that I can impart on anyone, and something that, I've worked to stick true to every single day. And it's just, I think, such a core part, of who I am and how I operate in the workplace.
Oh, yes, that is fantastic advice and something that I so agree with. And I think we'll talk more about this in our panel too, because having your own set of core principles is so important and not something that I think we really think of when we're starting in our career. And also finding employers that align with our core values and
Mhm.
principles can be very tough. I learned that very early on in my career when I was in financial services and sports in a couple different places. When you are first starting, at least I felt this way,
Mhm.
I noticed a lot of things that were really fundamentally wrong that were happening around me. They didn't align with my core principles. Even if I didn't, have them mapped out, at least I knew, what type of work I want to be aligned with. So
Mhm.
knowing when to walk away, I think is really important too. And I think especially our generation is trying to find that balance between wanting to change something and wanting to change workplaces that might not be what they should be. But then also knowing when to walk away and find career paths that align with our core principles and values. And I absolutely agree. At the firm, it was such a breath of fresh air to join here. I never thought I'd be at a law firm, but they really do. They're so supportive of my business. My manager is so
Mhm.
supportive of what I'm doing. And you can tell that they really are, those core principles are there.
Absolutely. And I mean, personally, I can just relate so strongly to the know when to walk away,
Mhm.
approach. As I mentioned, I started my career, thinking I was going to pursue issues concerning survivors of domestic violence and women's rights,
Mhm.
ended up being essentially funneled into big law, where, you're representing, huge corporations.
Mhm.
Suffice to say that didn't really align with my personal, politics or, the progressive background that I had been involved in, and was so, lucky, to be able to work at Bernstein Litowitz, where essentially we are, really, I'm continuing to represent survivors, it's survivors of
Mhm.
corporate fraud. And then
Exactly.
again, to see that women's rights angle, come back into central focus, really over the last couple of years with our Fox News litigation and with our litigation involving Signet Jewelers. It's really just, it's thrilling to be a part of a team of such talented people who are committed to those core principles, and to be actively involved on what I truly believe is the right side of litigating these cases that we see, on the front page of the Washington Post or the New York Times. We're really making a difference. And,
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
what kind of keeps me, you know, going up at the crack of dawn every day, is just really pursuing, your career with true, passion. It's real. I mean, what more could you really ask for in terms of a workplace?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Rebecca. And something too that I'm excited to touch on more. You're such a role model, especially for that next generation of lawyers, especially women, right? Because I think so many, and I know this because as I told you, my sister and her community are all recently graduated from law school and are studying their careers. And a theme I'm constantly seeing when we're talking is, I really want to do this. I'm so passionate about this cause, but you kind of keep getting pulled towards big law. And where does big law align or not align with the values that you hold in your career? And you're such a role model in that it can be done, right? Like you don't have to give up your personal values or mission and causes. There's always a way that you can align them. And you've done that with your work at the firm. You've done that with your work with Beyond Me Too working group. So I'm very excited to talk more about this and continue to share, your story. So other women not only have you as a mentor, like I'm not a lawyer, but of course I still see you as a mentor. And then especially for that next generation of upcoming lawyers, can learn from you and see that it can be done. So thank you so much for sitting down and talking with us today.
Thank you so much, Abby. Absolutely my pleasure.